My parents kicked me out at 18 for my brother. Now they won't leave me alone. I guess I always knew I was the extra child in my family. My older brother, Ethan, was always the golden child. Straight A's, honor roll, all the potential in the world. My parents poured everything into him, always talking about how he was going to be a doctor, an engineer, or whatever high-paying job they dreamed up for him. And me? I was just there. I was never a troublemaker. I kept my grades up, worked part-time in high school, and tried to stay out of their way. But no matter what I did, I was never good enough. I never expected to be the favorite, but I also never expected them to kick me out the second I turned 18. The day I was officially an adult. My 18th birthday should have been a celebration. Instead, it was the day my parents sat me down and told me I had 1 month to move out. Their reasoning? We need to focus on Ethan's future. He's going to make something of himself, and we can't afford distractions. Distractions. That's what they called me. You're an adult now. It's time you figure things out on your own. I was still in high school. I had no money saved, no plan, no safety net. They didn't care. Ethan was starting college soon, and all their resources needed to go to him. When I asked where I was supposed to go, my mom shrugged and said, "You'll figure it out. You're smart." And that was that. I packed a single duffel bag with the few things I owned and crashed at my friend Jake's house for a while. His parents were kind enough to let me stay while I finished high school, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. So I got to work. I picked up as many shifts as I could at my part-time job, eventually finding a cheap, barely livable studio apartment. It wasn't much, mattress on the floor, no furniture, barely any food. But it was mine. Meanwhile, my parents acted like I didn't exist. No calls, no texts, nothing. But they constantly bragged about Ethan on Facebook, posting about his scholarships, his bright future, the perfect son they were so proud of. I wasn't even a footnote in their lives anymore. Years later, the karma hits hard. Fast forward 6 years. I worked my ass off, juggling multiple jobs, building my own life from nothing. I didn't have my parents' support, but I did have determination. I eventually got into a trade school and became an electrician. Not the career they wanted for their perfect son, but you know what? It paid really well. By the time I was 24, I was making more money than I ever thought possible. And Ethan? Well, turns out all that potential didn't amount to much. Despite all the money my parents poured into him, Ethan flunked out of college twice. They pushed him into a major he hated, and he cracked under the pressure. He ended up dropping out, hopping from one dead-end job to another. And guess what? My parents were now struggling financially. All the money they had invested in Ethan's education was gone. They never saved for retirement because they were so convinced Ethan would become rich and take care of them. But he wasn't rich. He was still living at home, unemployed, draining whatever was left of their money. And suddenly, I was important again. The call I never expected. A few months ago, my mother called me for the first time in years. At first, I thought she dialed me by accident, but then she said, "Sweetheart, it's been so long. We miss you." I almost laughed. Miss me? You kicked me out the second I turned 18. She ignored that. We were thinking, maybe you could come visit. We'd love to see you. I asked, what do you really want? There was an awkward pause, then she sighed. Well, things have been difficult. Your father and I are struggling to keep up with expenses, and Ethan, well, he's had a tough time finding stable work. We could really use a little help. We know you're doing well for yourself, and we're so proud of you. I sat there in silence, just letting the irony sink in. For years, I was nothing to them. But now that their golden child failed, they suddenly remembered I exist. I told her, flat out, you didn't care about me when I was homeless. You didn't care about me when I was starving, struggling, and alone. You only care now because you need money. And I owe you nothing. She started crying, saying, that's not fair. We were doing what was best for the family. I just said, no, you were doing what was best for Ethan. And now you can live with that choice. And then, I hung up. Ethan and my parents made their choices. They threw me away like I didn't matter. They invested everything into him, expecting him to be their golden ticket. And now, they're reaping what they sowed. I built myself up from nothing, and I did it without them. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, blood means nothing when family treats you like you're disposable. Update. My parents kicked me out at 18 for my brother. Now they won't leave me alone. Well, I figured cutting my parents off would be the end of this whole mess. I was wrong. Turns out, when entitled people realize they can't manipulate you anymore, they double down. The harassment begins. After I told my mother I wasn't helping them, I thought that would be it. I imagined she'd be mad for a few days and then move on. Nope. She started calling me daily. I ignored the calls at first, but then she started leaving voicemails. The first few were sweet attempts at guilt tripping. Honey, we just want to talk. We miss you, sweetheart. Family is supposed to help each other. Then they got angrier. You're being selfish. After everything we did for you, this is how you treat us. Your father is ashamed of you. Oh, I'm selfish? Me? The kid they threw out like garbage at 18, so they could focus on Ethan's bright future? Right. I kept ignoring them. But then, the situation escalated. The uninvited guests. One day, I got home from work, and guess who was waiting outside my apartment? Yep, my parents. They had actually driven over to confront me in person. I didn't even get a chance to open my door before my mom started fake crying. Mom, sweetheart, please, we need you. Dad, we're struggling, and Ethan needs help. You can't just abandon us. I crossed my arms and stared at them. You abandoned me first. That shut them up for a second. Then my dad sighed, trying to act reasonable. Dad, look, you have a stable job, a nice place. We're not asking for much. Just a little financial support. Maybe you could let Ethan stay with you until he gets back on his feet. I laughed. Let Ethan stay with me? You mean the brother you threw me away for? The one who got every opportunity while I was left to struggle? That Ethan? My mom nodded like I was finally seeing their logic. Yes, he just needs a little help. You're his brother, after all. Oh, now I was his brother? I told them, no, absolutely not. You made your choice. You live with it. And then I walked inside and locked the door in their faces. The fake apologies. A few days later, my mom texted me. She apologized for how they treated me, but it was so obviously fake. We know we weren't perfect parents, but we did the best we could. You have to understand, we just wanted Ethan to succeed. But that doesn't mean we didn't love you. We just need a little help now, that's all. I didn't respond. So she tried a new tactic. She started having other family members call me. Aunts, uncles, even some distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They all gave me some version of, they're still your parents. You should help them. Family forgives. You don't want to live with regret. You know what I regret? Ever giving a damn about people who never gave a damn about me. I told every single one of them to stay out of it. I thought that was the end of it. Then, last week, my parents actually showed up at my workplace. Yes, they came to my job and tried to ambush me during my lunch break. I was sitting in my car when my dad knocked on the window. I rolled it down just a crack. This is insane. You need to leave. But my mom had the final dramatic plea. We're going to lose the house. We have nothing left. Are you really going to let your own parents end up homeless? I stared at them and said, you kicked me out when I had nothing. You told me to figure it out. Now it's your turn. Then I rolled up the window and drove away. Where things stand now, I finally had to block their numbers and warn my job not to let them in the building. Some family members are calling me cold-hearted, but the ones who actually know what happened are telling me I did the right thing. And Ethan? He still lives at home, unemployed, and completely useless. The golden child turned out to be fool's gold. And me? I'm doing just fine. I built my own life without them. And now, I'll keep living it without them.